We're going to take a look at the central nervous system, so the brain and spinal cord in this chapter. The brain and spinal cord are a processing center that are going to take a look at all the sensory information coming in and then decide what needs to be done about that and then send out motor signals to the muscles and glands. We're going to take a look at some of the anatomy of the central nervous system first. So we'll start with the gray matter and white matter. So let's take a look at a picture of this. How gray matter and white matter got its name is because of its color. So white matter looks white because of the myelin sheath that's on the myelinated axons that make up the white matter. And then the gray matter does not have any myelin in it. So the gray matter is actually made up of where we don't have any myelin sheath. So that would be the dendrites of the neuron, the cell body or the soma, and then also the axon terminals. So that would make up all of the gray matter. And all the synapsing will be occurring in the gray matter. So gray matter is really important because that's where you're going to be doing all of the communication. The white matter is where you have all of your myelinated axons. And remember the oligodendrocytes. That's the glial cell in the central nervous system that's making up the myelin sheath. The gray matter and the white matter are the opposite in the brain versus the spinal cord. So in the brain, the gray matter is on the outside for the most part, and the white matter is on the inside of the brain. The reason that is because there's a lot more surface area on the outside of the brain because there's a lot more folding on the outside of the brain, and so that will increase the amount of gray area that's on the brain on the outside surface here. And remember, the gray matter is really important because that's where all the synapsing is occurring, and so that's really important for all the things that the brain has to be able to do. The spinal cord is just the opposite. The gray matter is on the inside and the white matter is on the outside. And then just a couple of other terms. In the central nervous system, a cluster of neuron cell bodies, which remember the neuron cell bodies do not have a myelin sheath on them, so these would make up little islands of gray matter inside the white matter. These are called nuclei, and that would be the plural, and if you just had the singular, it would be a nucleus. And then if you have a bundle of axons, which they're going to be myelinated, that would be white matter. They can be either called pathways, tracts, fibers, or commissures. In the peripheral nervous system, we're going to change the names. And if you have a cluster of neuron cell bodies, they're going to be called ganglia, which would be the plural. And then in the singular would be a ganglion. And then a bundle of axons would be called a nerve. So in the central nervous system, we have, for example, the basal nuclei. So you can see deep inside the brain over here on the right side, you can see these islands of gray matter, these clusters of neuron cell bodies. And those basal nuclei we'll talk about later, but they're involved in movement. And then we've got a bunch of bundles of axons, the white matter. So we've got some association fibers, which are going to be used to communicate between adjacent areas of the cerebral cortex here. The commissural fibers, that would be used to communicate between the two hemispheres of the cerebral cortex. And then the projection fibers are going to be taking messages up and down from the brain to the spinal cord and vice versa. And then if we look in the peripheral nervous system, you can see we have a ganglion. That would be a cluster of neuron cell bodies. They're only just showing you one here, but there would be many. And the word ganglion actually means knot on a string, just because it looks like you've got this knot, this swelling on a string. And you can especially see this with this autonomic ganglion here, with these autonomic neurons that are forming those. And we'll talk about those in chapter 11.